Hi, I'm Alex. I'm with the Michigan Public Service Commission. I'm an economist in the renewable energy section. As Maya had mentioned, the Public Service Commission regulates utilities in the state of Michigan: natural gas, electric, telephone, some motor carrier. I was asked to talk about the renewable portfolio standard, which was a part of PA 295, so I thought I'd give you an overview of what PA 295 did. There were basically 5 parts to it. One was a renewable portfolio standard. The second was energy optimization. Third was also energy efficiency, but on the state government level. Fourth was the creation of wind energy zones for expedited transmission planning. And the last was changes to the net metering in the state. The renewable portfolio standard for Michigan was set at 10% of all renewable, of retail sales for all electric providers. That's to be met by 2015, and then at which point, very unfortunately, it stays at exactly that level. It's not that it stays at 10%, which would be nice, but it actually stays at the level that was met in 2015. For everybody, for the 2 large utilities, consumers and DTE, they have both incremental steps and a further set aside for them, which is that they can only, or not a set aside really, but they can only own 50% of the renewable energy generation, so that we have a diversity of ownership and development in the state. The renewable energy surcharge will be paid by citizens of Michigan on their bill, less than $3 a month. Just real quickly, the way that these companies are going to comply with the RPS is through renewable energy credits, or RECs. A REC is equal to 1 megawatt hour of electricity created. The price for that is about 1.57 cents, probably about to 5 cents. We contracted with a company called APX to create an online tracking and certification system called MyRex. It's available online if you want to check it out. They've done a bunch of similar systems around the country. I want to talk about the 2 big utility companies in the state, Consumers and DTE, because they handle about 90% of the market in the state. You can find this information, their renewable energy plans, on our website under the eDockets link. Consumers is KGU 15805. For consumers, they started at a pretty good spot. They already had some renewable energy going on, so they only have to add about 5.5% by 2015. They're going to spend $2.5 billion approximately over the next 20 years, and they had planned on building about 450 megawatts of wind and buying about 450. That was a year ago. Their plans, may or may not have changed. Probably the mix of the renewable energy has changed a little bit. Much to our delight, both Consumers and DTE developed pilot programs for distributed generation of photovoltaics. Consumers is called an experimental advanced renewable program, very similar to like a solar fit program. They're going to pay anywhere from 37 to 65 cents per kilowatt hour. It's for solar photovoltaics only. You get a contract up to 12 years, and they cap theirs at 2 megawatts. This is going to cost about $10 million, and set aside for residential is about 500 kilowatts, so about a quarter of the program. Detroit Edison plan, they start with a lot less renewable energy, so they have to develop 8.5% by 2015. They're going to spend about $3 billion over the next 20 years, and they're going to produce part of their RECs through advanced cleaner energy credits, which is allowable for them to substitute. They're gonna build less than half because they're so far behind the other program. And they have 2 distributed generation programs now under development: Solar Currents and a utility-built PV. The Solar Currents program for them, consumers registering to net metering. It's a 5 megawatt capacity, which is about 2.5 times bigger than consumers. It's solar only, contract to 20 years. The nice thing about it is they're paying for the RECs up front. People with federal incentives, with the payment from DTE, will get about 50% of the cost of the installation right up front, and then they're going to be paid throughout the term. The next is 15 megawatts for DTE. They're going to put solar panels on rooftops, some that they own, some that they're going to rent out throughout the state. One of the other parts of the RPS was state government energy efficiency. They plan to reduce energy purchases by 25%. I noticed when I was typing this up that it was energy purchases, not necessarily energy consumption, so I think that's kind of a little squirrely way to maybe use a little bit more energy, but you can go ahead. The last part of the bill was net metering, and this is something that has really had quite a profound impact on small-scale renewables in the state. Prior to PA 295, we really had a kind of just a voluntary program throughout the state. The utility companies would set up a program if they so desired. The PSC had no authority to establish a net metering program.
Can I just define net metering?
Oh, I'm sorry. Net metering is typically for small-scale producers of renewable energy, but it doesn't have to be. But it would be where, say I have a a PV at my house or a little wind turbine, and I use what I produce, and then when it's not producing for me, I would use electricity from the grid, from the utility company. In some states, actually, I think the meter spins backwards, maybe when your wind or solar panel are producing more energy than you need. I don't think that's the case here, but what we had prior to PA 295 was a situation where you didn't get the full retail price for the energy you produce, so it wasn't really advantageous for you to produce. Now, after PA 295, we have a program that just about everybody's happy with, or at least most of the consumers are happy with. We have true net metering under 20 kilowatts. Your bill is based on your net usage, which is part of that net metering definition. I'm sorry, I'm just moving my hand around. I didn't mean to do that. You get a credit for all the power that you produce above what you use. Those credits carry forward, but you will never be paid for them. So if you quit producing that power and they're used up, they're not going to cut you a check or anything like that, or if you move. You don't have to pay for any study or inspection, which is really huge. They also upped the limit, so the Act created a class of 20 kilowatts and below, then one from 20 to 150 kilowatts and one for 550 for methane digesters. Those larger classes have to pay a little bit more of the cost to see what the impact is going to be on the grid, but the lower guys under 20, which would be most home use, they don't have to pay anything except the fee.
For a typical home, what's a typical charge from the utility company for making the adjustments they need to make to set you up for net metering?
I think, we have a different person in my section who runs this program. I think it's under $100 now. I think it's around $25 to $100. So it's pretty minimal. You used to have to pay for the study, like how is my little dinky PV panel going to impact the grid. You don't have to do that anymore if you're under 20 kilowatts.
But it's not legislatively set for the utility to charge whatever they want?
I believe it was legislatively set that they couldn't.
That's okay.
I think there's some wiggle. They're allowed to charge like a little customer fee, but no, I don't think they're allowed to charge. That's why the cost is basically disappeared.
And I believe it's in the plan, so Public Service Commission could say that's too much.
Absolutely, they did, yes. They submitted that as part of their renewable energy plan. Okay. Just an indication of where we were at 2 years ago, 2007 and 2008, we got an F from Freeing the Grid, which is a trade publication. Now we've increased to a B, so that's got to be pretty good. This shows you the net metering installations through December of 2009. We release a report every June, so I don't have the figures obviously for June 2010. But as you can see, it's almost more than a doubling every single year. And I think by the time we get to June 10, we will have more than a doubling of the 137 customers. If you go to the next slide. And this just shows you the breakdown of the technologies being used. Hydro is pretty even across the board from beginning. Solar and wind are both climbing pretty rapidly. This I think is really neat. It's just a map of all the locations for our net metering. This is through June of 2009, but to me, it doesn't follow any logic. I mean, it does in a sense. You have, wind in certain areas where we might have wind, but then you have a bunch of solar up here in the UP and solar and wind down here, and I think it's probably due to the utility program, maybe due to local groups that really get everyone jazzed up about this kind of technology. But I just think it's really neat just so that this is happening all over the place. It's not Ann Arbor, where all this stuff is happening. No offense to Ann Arbor.
Down to with net metering typically.
I'm sorry?
What's the payback period typically come back down to? It's still like 8 years, 9 years.
Oh, with net metering? I think for solar, it's probably a lot longer than that. For the small scale wind, I'm not really sure to tell you the truth. Because you're not getting For the feed-in tariff aspect where you're getting 50, 60 cents for a solar kilowatt hour, the payback is, is quite short. But when you're just getting the 8 cents that, that you may pay DTE or consumers, it's a lot longer. So, really the whole point of today, the RPS and global climate change. I have a couple slides that you've already seen by Professor Barnes and presentation, but the Michigan Climate Action Committee proposed 20% by 2020 and 80% reduction in greenhouse gas by 2050. As we saw in some of the earlier graphs, electric consumption accounts for 36% of greenhouse emissions in Michigan, about 33% on a national level. So we have a great opportunity with an RPS to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The interesting thing, let's actually maybe just go ahead and skip forward. We saw this graph already. This is electricity consumption. It's not production, it's consumption, so we take care of the imports as mentioned earlier. One more. This is the breakdown of where we get our power from in the state of Michigan, and here's the breakdown of where the emissions come from for power generation. Coal is the obvious, real culprit here. This is really, to me, one of the more interesting graphs in this energy supply section. We have where greenhouse gas emissions would go without doing anything, and then we have what the Climate Action Committee considered, what did they call it? A recent action, which are increases to the federal CAFE standards and Michigan PA 295. Those aren't really counted in the future projections. So right here, this is the only benefit we get from both the CAFE standard changes and from PA 295. If you go to the next slide, this is where we're supposed to be in 2020. And the green is where the projections are supposed to bring us by 2025 and then continuing on probably to 2050. And this red, once again, is where our recent actions bring us. So PA 295, 10% of electricity from renewable sources is a really great idea. I think most people agree to that. It doesn't really get us very far. It gets us about 3.1%. I think is maybe the next slide. No, yeah, let's back up. But it gets us about, I think this is a 3.1% change or reduction in greenhouse gases. Part of that, I think, is due to the fact that that level stays constant in 2015. It doesn't even stay constant at 10%, like I mentioned. It stays constant at that nominal value of 2015. Can we back up one? Or one more? One more? No, we can skip really forward. Sorry. The crux of it is that the Michigan Climate Action Committee, in making an RPS such a significant part of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, it was two-parter. It was acknowledging and endorsing the RPS for PA 295, but it was also recommending the adoption of the Midwestern Governors Association goal, which I think is 20% by 2020, 25% by 2025, 30 by 3030. Okay, you can skip over those five. This is just RPSs for around the Midwest. As you can see, 10% is really kind of the bottom of the barrel here. Some are at 25, and some are going to increase probably in the future. Hopefully ours will as well. You can go ahead. And this is the RPS as a percentage of new renewable energy per year. We're at the 6 to 0.9%. It's hard to tell. What I forgot to mention when we talked about the credits in the beginning, we have incentive recs that can be created. You get bonus recs for peak production of energy, renewable energy, bonus recs for solar production, bonus recs for using Michigan labor and or production of the facility. So you're trying to hit 10%, but you're really maybe only hitting 9 or 9.5%, and you're really starting at about 3.5%. So you're really only getting about a 6% increase of renewable energy, and we're at 0.6 to 0.9. Okay. This shows you the new percentage of renewables per year, a whole bunch of states. Maine is kind of 40%. It's because they have a bunch of hydro. But when you look at some of the Northeast, New Hampshire, Delaware, New Jersey, Rhode Island, we're over 1%, 1.2, 1.6. We're somewhere over here between 0.6 and 0.9. We have a lot of work left to do in the state. Conclusion, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and everyone talked about this earlier, we're talking 50 to 80% greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2050. If we're only getting a 3.1% reduction from our 10% RPS, we've got a long, long way to go. One of the things to do would be to adopt the MGA's goal and potentially change the RPS in future years, in addition to some of the other suggestions by the other speakers. That's it.
I have a couple of questions. So, as I understand it then, if the goal of 10% is met, and energy production, electricity production, keeps increasing, the percentage without further legislation could actually decline.
It absolutely will decline.
And I don't know. And my second question is, do you know the status of the feed-in tariff laws and how that would change the picture quite a bit?
I'll be careful with what I say. Some of my colleagues are at a feed-in tariff discussion at Next Energy today, and I know there is currently legislation before the Michigan legislature on the feed-in tariff. I think it would probably do a lot. I personally don't think politically it will ever pass.
I think so. I'm going to say, I believe firmly in break, so I want you all to know that it's officially break time. So if you want to take a break, that's great. Otherwise, this was totally fascinating also. So if you have more questions, and I'd also encourage you guys to make this sort of a round robin again, sort of looking at the audience. There's tremendous expertise here and also around the room. So, and I'm going to.
Are your slides going to be available on the website for this?
Yeah, I finally got them to Maya this morning, so if and when they, then they'll be available. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll send you an email with the link to the website.
One of the projects that's gotten a fair amount of coverage is the Pentwater offshore, and kind of the trade-offs with that being one of the more beautiful touristy areas of the state and that kind of trade-off. But what I'm interested in is that aside from it being really windy over there, that it's right near the Ludington pump storage facility.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, there's about three questions really. What is the capacity of pump storage to increase efficiency of intermittent sources such as wind? And then secondarily, what is, if any, the environmental impact of pump storage? And then if those two answers are positive, can we build more pump storage to take advantage of the abundant and beautiful water resources we have? I know that when we built the Ludington pump storage facility, it was kind of an engineering marvel, but it's a really long time ago. And I just wonder why that sort of technology, kind of an integrated hydro efficiency boost, doesn't get more attention, especially in a place where we luckily have abundant water.
And I'm not an expert on this. I think, I know they've been replacing the turbines, I think, at Ludington to gain more efficiency. I don't know that there's plans to ever build any more, although it probably would be a great idea, at least in my opinion. I don't know that anyone has the property to do so, though. It's a pretty huge place. I don't know about the environmental impacts, to tell you the truth. I do know that as part of PA 295, they get an incentive rec if they use renewable energy, or they get credit, I guess, for tax, if they use renewable energy to pump up the water during non-peak hours. So at night they would use wind energy to pump water up to Ludington and then use that energy or use the production during peak hours.
Yeah, I mean, from an environmental standpoint, the only thing that there are impacts on fish. Because you're pulling in a whole lot of water, pumping it up the hill and running it down. And we went through a major settlement with MUCC and the state. A whole lot of people a number of years ago, and we have nets that we put out every year and pull back in the when the ice is going to come. And so we do a lot of things to minimize those impacts. And but there's no question anytime you're pulling a whole lot of water into anything, there are environmental impacts. Yeah, it's all trade-offs.
The key might be turning into a water park, so when they release the water, you can tube down.
And the new turbines that are going in are much more efficient, so that's and much more fish friendly.
Right. But I was just thinking, in terms of nukes, when we pull the water in and we put it back out, it's warm, and that can have its own environmental impacts and those sort of things.
We have closed cycle pull. We pull in some.
There's a gentleman in the back.
Question on municipal utilities. What's their requirements? You talked about consumers and DTE. What do municipals
They
have to
the same
do?
requirement of.
Same, everything's the
Yes.
same pretty much,
Yeah,
except
so
they have their
all
own
electric
plan.
service providers, even ones we don't typically regulate for PA 295, they do have to meet the 10%.
Thank you.
This is maybe the two of you, both of you. I mean, Cape Wind has been what, they've been fighting that for, that's not Michigan, fighting that for, 15 years. I know DT is having some issues with getting sighting in the thumb, people are complaining about the noise and what have you. And to me, one of the most shocking things you said was that, 9 years to set a nuclear power plant. I guess two questions. First of all, where do renewables fit into that? How long does it take to get public buy-in, yada, yada, yada. And then second, if it's 9 years, I don't see how you get 9 years and then the development of power plants, and we need to, that huge increase in nuclear, unless we're, starting that all right now. I mean, if we start that in 2015, those plants aren't done till 2030, right? So the timing, I guess, so how do we streamline, or can we streamline the process to make it more efficient and effective?
Senator McCain asked the same question to our CEO when he came to visit when he was running for president. Our CEO answered and said, we'd appreciate anything you do to help streamline that. But, for us, we started our licensing in end of 2008. So, our plan is by 2012, or shortly thereafter, we'd have a license and could start construction. If that's, we've not made the decision to do that yet because of the cost. But yeah, there's no question it takes a while. And that's kind of why in developing national climate legislation, basically what we've said is you're well into the 2020s before you can start making a significant change in the emissions from generation. So whether it's carbon capture and storage or nuclear or even renewables, it does take a while to build renewables and get approvals. It depends on the areas. Some areas have their own zoning. So there's whole different things, and it's like anything.
But you need to build the grid.
Right,
No one
yeah,
wants it. No one wants any of it.
Right.
To speak
Right.
to the question about Dave, about Professor Barnes, the sequestration, people are going to be weary that they don't want wind turbines near their yards. They don't want a coal plant or
Right.
nuclear plant near their property. They don't want transmission.
Right.
Take this.
Yeah, and that's why, efficiency, we need to be as efficient as we possibly can. The reality is we're still going to need generation even after we advance as much as we can on the efficiency side. But, that's, and no matter which generation you pick, there are downsides to them. So,
Is there enough decoupling in Michigan to drive efficiency to where we need it, or?
That's
Yes,
such
no,
a-
maybe.
It seems like they're making great strides in
Right.
improving efficiency. There's some good programs.
You talked a lot about the renewable portfolio standard in PA 295, but there's also an efficiency standard.
Yeah.
Everything I read suggests that efficiency comes first, efficiency is the cheapest, efficiency is the best. Yet, PA 295 only taught 5% efficiency, or 10% renewable portfolio. What are the politics, what's the future of pushing that 5% efficiency to a much higher level?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the politics are probably a bit. You're basically asking profit-motivated companies to make less money. So you put them in an awful position to say that we're a for-profit company, and somebody wants us to make, to create programs to have people buy less from us. That's counterintuitive.
But that's been done very successfully in California. That also
No, and it can be successful, but it,
right, and there is decoupling provision that's now done through the Public Service Commission. And we're actually proposed increasing the efficiency part of our development beyond 5%. I think
And I have a
it's
feeling
6
we're-
or 7, but it's a step.
But what you might see with renewables and with efficiency is that it's a big pill for everyone to swallow at first, and they realize they can do it a lot easier and a lot cheaper than everyone thought, and that those goals or volumes will increase.
But you do, I mean, one, just benchmark, you had ACE passed 16 states so far this year, and with bipartisan support, it passed out of the House committee, but with only Democratic support.